Have you ever read a series of books that you find it really hard to pick apart and discuss coherently? This book review is going to be about one of those. Welcome back to the channel, Book Dragons. I'm so glad you're here with me today. I'm going to be talking about why I think you should read the Books of Earthsea by Ursula K Le Guin. This is just a fantastic series, guys, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I don't want to spoil the series for you, but I want to give you just enough to wet your whistle and see if this is something you think you might want to check out. So stick around if you want to find out more about the Books of Earthsea. And if you enjoy this video, I'd appreciate it if you give it a like. It really does help YouTube to recommend my video to more people. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already as well. And make sure to click on my link tree in the description below so that you can find all of the other places you can reach out to me. Like my Discord server. If you haven't joined that, you can join there as well. And that takes care of all the typical stuff. Let's get right to this review, and I'm going to beg your pardon here. I'm going to go ahead and put on my eyes because I have made a few notes that I want to make sure and hit on, because to be honest with you guys, this was kind of a complex series to tackle in terms of a review. There's a lot of moving parts, it's a really unique world, and I want to make sure I do it justice and also make sure that I don't really spoil the book for you. So I made notes for that reason. This is going to be a somewhat quote-heavy review as well, because I want to share some quotes that meant a lot to me from these books that kind of help give you an idea about the world. Earthsea is a work of fantasy literature comprised of 6 main books. And those books are A Wizard of Earthsea, The Tombs of Atuan, The Farthest Shore, Tehanu, The Tales from Earthsea, and The Other Wind. There are also a few short stories that are included with some of the individual books. If you buy them individually, they can be found usually on the internet in different places and in certain book collections. So I won't go into too much on that. I'm just mainly going to focus on the main 6 books in the series, okay? LeGuin is a very celebrated science fiction and fantasy author. She's won several awards. She's well known for pushing the limits of what is deemed acceptable in literature. For instance, the main character in Wizard of Earthsea, Ged, is a black man. It was unheard of at the time these books were written to have a black man as a main character, so I thought that was really awesome. But she's just a very thoughtful and philosophical writer, and I just got so much out of these books. And the Earthsea books are normally labeled as young adult, which I'm going to push back on because there are concepts in this series that not every young adult reader might be able to grasp. A lot of them can. I'm not saying that applies to everyone, but it just depends on the young adult reader. And Ursula K Le Guin herself has said that she does not write young adult fiction. She writes fiction that can be enjoyed by young adults, and older adults, and anyone who is capable of reading the books can enjoy them in their own way. So she's not a genre fiction writer. She's very clear about that in the foreword to this book and in some of the appendices. She likes to be enjoyed by people outside of genre, which is awesome. This can also be looked at as an adventure story. It can be looked at as a work of philosophy, because there are many, many elements of philosophy in this series, especially in certain books, such as The Farthest Shore. I think The Farthest Shore is one of the most philosophical works of this series, and it's also one of my favorite books in the series. So I hope you'll stick around with me as we go on this journey of delving into some of the aspects of this series, and I won't be able to entirely do it justice, but I hope you'll bear with me in any case. One other thing I want to talk about briefly is that this series is set in a very unique location. You don't find many fantasy series that are set in a world of islands. So this is called Earthsea for a reason. There are archipelagos and islands set in the middle of vast oceans that separate one from the other. And so seafaring is a big focus of this story, taking boats to places like the farthest shore. And it's just really breathtaking to see this world that LeGuin has created that is designed in a way that not many fantasy stories are. And I just really enjoyed that aspect of it. So we're going to talk about characters real quick. There is a small cast of characters. The main character being the wizard Ged. He comes to the school of wizardry on the island of Roke as a young boy. He goes up, knocks on this nondescript door. A man opens the door and asks him a series of questions, and he eventually gets into the school and rises up in the ranks of wizardry. And along the way, he makes mistakes, some of them big mistakes, others minor mistakes, but they do have ripples. And that's one of the things that you'll see throughout the course of this book is the choices that we make ripple into the waters of the future. And he makes one really big one in the first book in A Wizard of Earthsea that not only has lasting effects on him as a person, and I don't want to go into details because it'll spoil everything else, but it also ends up affecting other people in his life, other people not in his life, other creatures of Earthsea. It has that ripple effect. So that's one of the big elements that Ursula K Le Guin deals with. Also, there is Tanar. She is a priestess of an order that believes that the person in her position has been reincarnated over and over to take up this position of the priestly duties, and she has to roam around in darkness all the time, and eventually she encounters Ged, and Ged helps her to open her mind. And there's other characters like Tahanu and the other wizards of Roke as well, such as the Master Patterner and the Master Summoner, and they each have different roles based on their abilities with magic, and they do play a major role in the story, but they are not really main characters. For most of the book, you really are focusing on Ged and those in his circle of influence. As the story progresses, some of the later books don't feature Ged as much, but he is there. Sometimes only his presence is felt in the crumbs of the story. It's just a beautiful tapestry that Le Guin has woven with these characters. There are also other creatures in this world. Some of them are from the dark parts of the universe, like demons and things like that. There are dragons in this story as well. Some of those dragons talk, some of them do not talk. And I loved the lore of the dragons in this world because they very much consider themselves separate from humans. They look down on humans as being very finite, very limited in their lifespan, and dragons live for hundreds, thousands of years. They are rumored to have been the first ever inhabitants of the world of Earthsea, even before humans came on the scene. And there are different ways that story is told. Some say that the dragons changed shape into humans and left to form their own colonies. Some of them say that humans were always separate from dragons, but they kind of evolved. And some humans still have certain abilities to become dragons. And so it's a very unique world. I love the take on dragons. It was just so breathtaking. And you know me, I love dragons. I love dragons so much. So now I want to talk about the themes. And I will say that this is really where a lot of the philosophical elements come into this story. Ursula K Le Guin was a philosophical Taoist, which I find really cool because I also find great affinity with philosophical Taoism. In fact, fun fact, Ursula K Le Guin actually wrote a translation of the Tao Te Ching, and in each section she kind of has little notes that she's made along the way about what it means to her and what she thinks it might mean to other people. And the philosophies of Taoism were very important in her life, and you can see it in the Books of Earthsea as you read. Some books more than others, as I said before, but it is there, and it influences a lot of the thematic elements, such as what I talked about before with the ripple effect of the choices we make now rippling into the future. And there are other themes as well. I mentioned briefly about coming of age. This is a very strong coming of age story. Not only the coming of age of Ged, but there are coming of age elements for Tanar and Tahanu. There is a young king that Ged eventually brings to rule over the kingdom, and he is very young at the time. He is a preteen, maybe teenager at the time that he is first discovered and comes to power. So you've got that element of coming of age with him, and I think that's partly why a lot of people label this series as young adult, because it has that coming of age element, but it is so much more complex than that, and the characters are so deeply realized that it just doesn't feel young adult to me. So I'll stop belaboring that point, but you kind of see where I'm coming from. Another theme that comes about over and over in the book is the oneness of all life, the oneness with the cycle of life. There are several points in the story where characters will talk about the fact that when they die, they will become part of the greater mechanism of life and the greater being that is life and the greater universe that exists that connects all of life. And it's just a beautiful way that she has expressed it in this story. So you will find that theme popping up over and over again. Oneness with all life. Everyone is the same as everyone else. Even with the dragons, even though they live longer than we do, there is a sense in which we are connected to the dragons as well, and they are connected to us, and we are all partaking of the same expression of life and creation. And so I really, really love that about this series. Corruption of power is another one that Ursula K Le Guin seems to really emphasize in this story, because there are people who come to power, some of them the very masters of the school of Roke. They have come to power and it has corrupted them. They have started becoming greedy and selfish and wanting more power and more power, especially the power to live forever, which is completely unnatural in the sense of this world. To crave that kind of power where you can live forever disrupts the order of life. And there are wizards who decide that it's their right to live forever and become so powerful that nothing else can take them down. And I just loved how deeply she portrayed that in this book. It was just fascinating to see how she executed that in the development of certain characters and the interactions of Ged and the people around him with those certain characters to communicate that particular theme. It was just really, really well done. there's also a sense of using magic only when you absolutely need to. And I thought that was really awesome because, I mean, all of us are susceptible to feeling like if we had magic, we would do whatever we could with magic. We would be almost unlimited in what we could do with it. And that's not the sense in this book. There is magic, and the magic is elemental. It is fueled by the elements around us, by water and by fire and wind and things like that. But it is only to be used sparingly because it can get out of control, especially for people who don't know how to use it correctly. And there are times when Ged is sailing in his little boat and he just decides, I'm just going to sail the boat. I could use my mage wind, but I'm not going to because it's unnecessary. What would it accomplish? Is there any need to be at the place I'm going to at a certain time? So there's questions around the use of magic and when it's appropriate and realizing why it's not appropriate in certain circumstances. And I really, really like that. I think that was another theme, is being aware when something is urgent and when it's not. Going with the flow is a very strong theme in this book as well. Going with the flow of life, letting life just guide you along on the journey. And that really spoke to me. That really engaged me with this story. So I absolutely loved it. Let's talk about pros and cons for a minute. I don't really have any cons personally, but there are some things that you may find to be cons for you. One of which may be the writing. I really love the writing, but I can say that a lot of this story is very minimal on dialogue. There is a lot of description. So I do hear people talk a lot about over-description in Lord of the Rings and other books like it. There is a lot of description in this book. It's very vivid, it's very engaging, I think, but there's a lot of description and very minimal use of dialogue. So if you like dialogue-heavy books, that might be a turnoff for you. Action is minimal as well. There is action. There are definitely action-packed sequences and really interesting magical duels and things of that nature, but it's minimally used to further the story. So this is a very story-driven book series, and so if you like something that's action-heavy and dialogue-heavy, this might not be a series that you would enjoy as much as others. But I highly encourage you to give it a try and see if it's for you, because the way the story is told, the way the descriptions are set in writing is just breathtaking. And that's going to be one of the things that I really liked about it, and that is the prose. She writes this so beautifully, and it's not archaic in any way, shape, or form. I think it's engaging. It's not difficult to understand, but it will take you a while to read it because of the way it is written. It's a very picturesque writing style. The way she describes the surroundings of the world that she's created is just fantastic. The world building in this series is fantastic. So I just, the characters, while there is a small cast of characters, the way the characters are developed is really, really good. So I would say that this has a lot going for it, a lot more pros than cons, so I definitely hope you'll check it out. Before I get to some really important quotes, I do want to talk briefly about my ranking. For this series, I put it in my hoard. It's not my top favorite series of all time, but it is an excellent series, and it's going in my hoard for sure. Let's do some quotes, and the first quote I'm going to share with you is LeGuin's own thoughts on the theme of the book. And here's what she says. I can see now its theme coming together from elements of all the previous books. She says this toward the end of the series. joining forces and playing out in a way I could never have foreseen when I started A Wizard of Earthsea. Even when I started The Other Wind, all I knew certainly was that the increasing imbalance in the practice of wizardry was caused by a profound error made long ago, and that not only Cobb in The Farthest Shore, but Thorian of Roke embodied this misunderstanding of the uses of power, the desire for control, and the nature of death. This was my great theme. To find its resolution, I had to play it through. I did so. I knew partly what I wanted it to say. Not till it was said did I know fully. I love that quote. I love getting the author's perspective on a lot of her writing. It's just fascinating to read all of her little interludes in between the different books where she talks about the writing process. And this quote really stuck out to me. So it's really obvious her theme is the corruption of power that makes people greedy, even to the point of wanting to live forever. So I thought that was really good. Some of these next quotes I'm going to share with you are from The Farthest Shore. The first one is from Ged, and he says, "When I was young, I had to choose between the life of being and the life of doing. And I leapt at the latter like a trout to a fly. But each deed you do, each act, binds you to itself and to its consequences, and makes you act again and yet again. Then very seldom do you come upon a space, a time like this, between act and act, when you may stop and simply be, or wonder who, after all, you are." That is such an amazing quote, and it held so much meaning for me. That just really spoke to me. The next one, he says, "When we crave power over life, endless wealth, unassailable safety, immortality, then desire becomes greed. And if knowledge allies itself to that greed, then one does evil. Then the balance of the world is swayed, and ruin weighs heavy in the scale." Ah, so good. Here's another one, and this one specifically relates to dragons. "The dragons are avaricious, insatiable, treacherous, without pity, without remorse. But are they evil? Who am I to judge the acts of dragons? They are wiser than men are. It is with them as with dreams, Aron. We men dream dreams. We work magic. We do good. We do evil. The dragons do not dream. They are dreams. They do not make magic. It's their substance, their being. They do not do. They are." And wow, I thought that was a phenomenal quote. Just really interesting to see the lore around dragons in this series. Another one here is, "Never fear. It is much easier for men to act than to refrain from acting. We will continue to do good and to do evil. But if there were a king over us all again, and he sought counsel of a mage, as in the days of old, and I were that mage, I would say to him, my lord, do nothing because it is righteous or praiseworthy or noble to do so. Do nothing because it seems good to do so. Do only that which you must do and which you cannot do in any other way." And I thought that was so good. And here's the final one from The Farthest Shore. "I know that there is only one power that is real and worth having, and that is the power not to take, but to accept." So good. So those were all from The Farthest Shore. I want to share a couple that I thought were really cool from The Other Wind. The first one is, "There's seldom as much hurry as I used to think there was." And that just goes back to that theme of realizing when something is urgent and when something is not urgent. And he's come to the end of his life in The Other Wind. He's an old man at this point, Ged is. And he's just realized, I'm just not in as much of a hurry anymore. And another really quick one is, "Never trouble trouble." Or in other words, don't go looking for trouble. Don't go seeking it. Otherwise, you're going to find it a lot easier than you might have otherwise. And I just love that. I love that. So this has been a very different review. I get it. I hope it's been meaningful to you. I hope it's been beneficial. I hope this has given you a better idea if this book is something that you want to put on your list to explore. If you have read the Books of Earthsea, I would love to talk with you in the comments below, find out your thoughts about it. And if you haven't read the Books of Earthsea, does this make you more interested to read it? Please let me know. I would love to hear that from you. And I just want to reiterate again, I really hope you pick this series up, guys. And until next time, please make sure that you're reading more books. I'll talk with you soon.